Good evening, Yvette Jackson. Thank you for allowing us into your home here in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm Dr. Rashanice Candy Tate with the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, Atlanta Organizing Branch. And I'm here with
Robert Pinnell of Atlanta Metropolitan State College and also ASALA.
And tonight is July 25th. July 27th, 2015. I gotta look at the 5. I'm getting dyslexic. But in any case, it's July 27th, 2015. Thank you again for letting us into your home. And I'm going to let Robert start off the interviews.
Okay.
Where and when were you born?
I was born in Dayton, Ohio, August 11th, 1968.
Who were your parents? Or who are your parents and what were their occupations?
My parents are Lawrence and Anita Jackson, and my dad was self-employed. He did work at Dayton Tire and Rubber, then he was laid off, and then he decided to start his own business. He already had it part-time, but then he decided to do it full-time. So he's always been an entrepreneur for the majority of my life. And then my mom was a secretary in different companies.
What business did your father start?
He started a home remodeling and repair business, so he knows how to fix any and everything. He's the man.
Were either of your parents involved in the military?
Yes, my father was in the Army, so he was in the Vietnam War, and that's when he got out to marry my mother. So he was drafted, and he did, I think he said, 2 years, and then they let him out, and he married my mom.
Has he ever told you any stories about his experiences in the military?
No, my dad was very secretive. Not really secretive, but he didn't really talk about that experience. So when I produced and directed a film in 2011 about African American women in the military, then he told me a bit more about his experiences, and it was basically about Vietnam. And he was a jokester, so he just told me about all the trouble he got into when he stole a vehicle and went to the next camp and they weren't supposed to. So he told me those kind of stories. But my father is very, very fun, very playful, so he really doesn't deal on negatives. So he never told me anything negative or bad. It was just always the fun that he had.
Was he an influence in you joining the military?
Actually, he wasn't, because I really didn't realize he was in the military when I joined. I mean, I saw a picture of him in a military uniform, but it really never clicked that he served. I guess only because he did 2 years. He wasn't a career military person, so I didn't grow up with a military lifestyle like a lot of people do who are career military people. So I didn't do that. So when I joined and I told him, that's when I really became aware that he was in the military as well.
Who are your siblings?
I have a sister. Her name is Anissa, maiden name Jackson, but now she's Taylor.
Has she ever served in the military?
No, I wanted her to join the Air Force, but at the time she didn't pass the test, so she got discouraged and never went in. I told her to keep taking it, but she got discouraged, so no, she didn't. I was the only one.
What were you doing before you entered the service?
Well, I was 17, so I was in high school. So I signed up at 17 and I left for basic training 2 months after I turned 18. So actually just prior to that, I worked at McDonald's and Stump's grocery store after high school in the summer before I left for basic training, which was that November. So I signed up in June and I left for basic training in November.
Was there a reason why you wanted to sign up so early?
You know, military was not a part of my career plan. I've always had my life plan since I was in grade school. I knew what high school I was going to was a business school. I knew I was going to major in cosmetology. But the military was not in my plans. I was watching TV one day and a military commercial came on. And it was talking about paying for school, providing housing and food and those type of things. And I was like, sounds like a good idea. So just one day, I'm very spontaneous, I always have been. One day I just got up and went to the recruiter's office. I didn't even know which service I wanted to join. I just went in the very first one. Thank God it was the Air Force. And the rest is history.
So you're happy with the decision you made joining the Air Force?
Most definitely changed my life in ways I cannot even really fathom sometimes, because I was very shy, very quiet. I was an introvert, and the military brought all of that out of me, because you have to speak. They train you to be leaders. So you have to speak, you have to talk, you have to make presentations, you have to lead people. So I learned how to be confident in my voice and who I was as a person.
So was there any specific reason why you chose the Air Force? Or was it
No, again, I
chance?
just random. Just walked down the street. I think at that time in Dayton, Ohio, they had all the recruiters in one block. And so that was just the first store I went in. I started talking to the recruiter and told him that I wanted to join the military. And he, talked, gave his spiel, told me different things. But after I joined and learned about the other branches, I was glad I joined the Air Force. Very glad, because I was a diva, still a diva, and Air Force lets me be a diva to a certain extent. You still can't wear big earrings like I like to wear, but you're still able to wear earrings, nail polish, lipstick, so that was a great service for me.
So what were those things that kind of, I guess, made you feel that was the best decision compared to what you heard about the other branches?
Well, it wasn't really like the military. It was more like a civilian job, because you had a job, and my job was, at the time, it was called information management, which they changed it to administrative. So it was basically administrative work, so paperwork, and I grew up loving paperwork. Since my dad had his own business, my mom did the books, so she always taught me how to do the books. So I've always loved paperwork, and that was my job, because that's what I scored highest in when I took the test. But it was just like going to work 9 to 5 every day. There were times, of course, when you had to do exercises and sleep in the field, but that was also stuff I loved, because I was a tomboy. I was a tomboy for a number of years, and then my mom, she wasn't feeling it because she's a diva, so she made me start wearing dresses. So I'm dual. I can, take off my little high heels and play football with the guys, or I can put them back on, put my earrings on, lipstick, and act like a girl.
How long was your service? From what year to what year?
So I signed up in 1968, and I retired in December of 2006. So I did 20 years, a few months. Few days. 1986, sorry. Sorry. I signed up in 1986, and then I retired in December of 2006.
So you got my date.
Yes.
Yes.
What year did you leave for basic training?
I left in November of 1986, and I went to Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas for basic training.
How did you get there?
How did I get there?
Get through what means of transportation?
Plane. And that was the first time I'd ever been on a plane by myself. That was probably the first time I'd ever been out of Dayton, Ohio by myself. My family traveled a lot, but we traveled as a family, because my father has 5 brothers and sisters, and so we always traveled together, and we've been many, many places. So I was used to traveling.
But in the cars?
In cars.
Okay.
Well, actually, we had a big old yellow bus that we traveled in. But I was used to traveling, so when I went to the military, it's just further gave me what I love, which is to travel.
What was going through your mind while you were on that plane?
I really cannot tell you, because I cannot remember that at all. I just remember being excited, because I like adventure. I like things that are unknown. It excites me. So I just remember being excited for this new adventure that I was taking in my life. I had no fear whatsoever, but now that I look back, I'm like, why wasn't I scared? I don't understand why I wasn't scared, but I wasn't. I was looking forward to this new adventure in my life, so I imagine I was excited.
What was your first experience once you got the basic training?
My first experience was, I don't know why I did this, but before I left for basic training, I cut my hair really short because I thought it would be easier to take care of it. Not thinking I was not going to be allowed to curl my hair every day. So that was not a good move. So I looked like a chicken pretty much all the basic training, because they wouldn't let you curl your hair. So that was not a good move. So all I was thinking was, when we first got there, we were all in this big room, and then they gave us the speech. What I remember is they said you had to pack up your makeup, your curling irons, all of your stuff you had to pack up, and they were going to put it in a big storage room until you were done. And I was like tripping out about that. I was like, well, how am I supposed to curl my hair? It's like, yeah, right. You're in basic training, you're in the military. So I guess that's probably when it first hit me what I did. I mean, I wasn't regretful, because that's what I wanted to do. But it first hit me as to what I did. I joined the military. And so from that point forward, I started having that mindset. Okay, I'm in the military. All my little girly ways and everything in high school and all of that is over, and now I need to adapt to the environment that I'm in now.
Was there any culture shock once you got to this new area?
Yes, there was. I had never in my life taken a shower with anyone else. And the the first day we had to take showers. There's a big old room with a bunch of shower heads, and we were all supposed to take a shower together. And I was like, what? Never done that, and I'm not comfortable doing that. So for like the first 2 days, I would like mess around in my bag, pretend like I was looking for something till everybody was out, and then I ran in there and took a shower real quick. But after 2 days, you were over that because you had like 3 minutes to shower. So it was like, okay, I'm over that.
Do you recall any of your instructors?
I had a man and 2 females, but the man, his name was Sergeant Blanco. And I remember him vividly because he was very cute. Very cute. So yes, that's his name.
Now, what were they like?
You know, one piece of advice that my recruiter gave me that saved me in basic training, I believe, he said it's all a game. He said they're going to be screaming at you, they're going to be hollering at you, they're going to be telling you to do this, that, and the other. You just do it, but don't start crying, don't get mad because it's all a game. That's their job. Their job is to make you strong, you know, to make you military strong. So that piece of advice saved me when they were like up in my face screaming and hollering at me, and you're supposed to say yes sir and yes ma'am. So to the women I would say yes sir, and then they would holler at me, I'm not a sir. I'm like, yes ma'am. So it was just, if he not had given me that advice, I might have started crying. I might have not been able to handle it. I might have, because this was a whole new experience for me. I'm away from my parents. You can't call them every day. We didn't have cell phones, of course, and if we did, we wouldn't be able to use them. So I was like on my own, having to grow up. This just turned 18-year-old girl who's never been away from her parents or family. So that was very rough. But again, he gave me that piece of advice, so I was able to survive that.
Would you say that was the most difficult part of basic training?
No, the most difficult part was actually the running. Because I was a tomboy, I aced the obstacle course. I mean, aced it. But running, it's not my forte. So I couldn't run. We had to run 1.5 miles. I couldn't do it. And so when we had to qualify, I called my parents because they let us make phone calls. And I was crying. I'm like, I'm not going to make it. I can't run. And so the day we had the test, 2 of my girlfriends saw me struggling. And so they both grabbed each one of my arms and they helped me pass the test. They helped me finish at the risk of them not passing. So that's when I realized that the military family is a family. They look out for you, they take care of you, they make sure that you don't fail.
Did you receive any specialized training?
Yes, after that I went to technical school in Biloxi, Mississippi, and that's where I learned my craft of information management, which was, again, administrative. So they taught you, I already knew how to type because of my mom, but they taught you how to type. They taught you basically secretarial skills at that time.
When you enlisted, were you looking toward doing more administrative work, or were you looking for something a little more physical?
I did not have any preconceived notions of anything. I just knew I joined the military and that was it. I didn't even know, honestly, whether I joined active duty or reserve. I had no clue. Because again, that time I was really shy, so I didn't ask questions. People just told me stuff and I just took it, and then I was afraid to like ask questions, or afraid to say anything. So I'm like, I didn't even know. And then they asked everybody, okay, who's active duty, who's reserve? They want to separate us for whatever reason, and I really didn't know. I had to look at my card, and they were like, okay, you're reserve. I'm like, okay, I'm reserve. But it was a good thing.
The difference between active and...
in your opinion, what's the difference between active and reserve?
Well, the difference is active duty means you work at a military installation every day. So Monday through Friday, and sometimes they call for weekends, but mostly, like I said, a civilian job. Monday through Friday, you go to work from like 9 to 5 or whatever your hours are, and then you go home, whether that be the barracks, you know, the dorms, or you have housing off base. Pretty much the dorms are housing off bases where that happens. In reserve, you go 1 week in a month and 2 weeks in the summer. So I did reserve because my plan was to already go to college. I was going to the University of Cincinnati. I had already been accepted, but I took a little detour when I joined the military. So I wanted to do the reserve because I wanted the military life, but I also wanted the college life. So to me, that was the best of both worlds, and it did end up being the best of both worlds because the money from the reserve paid for my car note. So I always had a car. I didn't have to worry about having a car. Not having a car, I always had a car. So that worked out perfectly for me throughout college.
So is that balance manageable?
It was very manageable. It's just that on the weekends when I had to go to reserve, my dad or my cousin would have to come and get me from school and take me back home, because University of Cincinnati is an hour, 45 minutes to an hour from where I lived. So they would have to come and get me so I can go to work.
How did you adapt to military life? Was there any big change you had to make?
I adapted pretty easily because I was only in the reserve. Now, had I gone active duty straight, then it might have had a little few learning curves, because you're doing that every day, and you get stationed somewhere that may be, thousands of miles from your parents, from your family, from what you know. But for me, doing the reserve, I was able, after basic training test school, I was able to come back home and be in familiar territory. So for me, it wasn't really a learning curve, except for the fact that in the beginning I got in trouble a lot because I'm very stubborn and I like to do what I like to do, and I didn't want to follow rules. And so when it came to them putting me out, and that's when I straightened my act up and I took it serious, and I decided to become the best military person that I could be. So I would get in trouble for, like, you're not supposed to wear white socks, you're supposed to wear black. Well, I couldn't find my black one day and I had to be at work, so I wore white. So I got in trouble for that. Got in trouble for a little stuff because I didn't want to adhere to the rules, all other rules. So then after that, I was like, okay, gotta play by their rules.
So what happened when you didn't play by the rules?
You would get written up. And like, I'm not a morning person, so I was always late. And they were like, okay, if you're late one more time, you're gonna get written up. So then I would be late the next day and I would get written up. And then, like I said, when it got to the point where it was too much, they was like, okay, you know what? If you're late one more time, then it would get serious and more serious. And then, like I said, I was getting in trouble in so many different areas. It was just like, okay, you know what? You're risking being put out. And I'm like, no, I don't want to be put out. I love it. So that's when I straightened it up. I think at that time I was 19. So I'd only been in a year. You know what I'm saying? It's just like growing pains. Just like children growing up. They have to learn what's right, what's wrong, what you can do, what you can't. It's kind of what I was going through.
So with you having to do reserve duty and still going to school, were there any tools that you learned while you were in the reserve that you had to take over with you to college?
Most definitely. But like I said, the military teaches you to be a leader, and it teaches you to have discipline and structure, which is great for me because I was, again, hard-headed and didn't like structure so much. And then my parents were not really strict because I was always independent, and I had my first job at 15. So I always worked in addition to having my fun. I always handled my business in addition to having my fun. So I didn't grow up in a strict environment, and now I'm in a strict environment where there's structure and I have to, abide by these rules and that. And, that was a little hard to adjust to, but having to adjust to that helped me with my discipline in college. So I knew that I had to study. But I also had my fun, but I knew that I had to study first and then have my fun. And if I didn't, then I couldn't have my fun for that day. So it gave me that structure that I needed being a freshman. And a lot of freshmen in college don't have that. You know what I'm saying? The first year is usually party, grades go down. So for me, that helped me have that structure that I needed.
Where did you serve?
Where all have I served? Well, I started at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio.
You said like when each one? I said you just say when for each one.
When?
Yeah, for each one.
Okay. Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio. I started in, November. Basic training was 6 weeks, and tech school was 6 weeks. So let's say like January of 1987 is when I started at my unit with the 906 Civil Engineering Squadron. So I started there, and then I was at Wright-Pat for 8 years. And then I moved to Atlanta in 94 and joined 94th Civil Engineer Squadron at Dobbins Air Reserve Base in Georgia. But in between times, I've traveled to, or I've worked many places. I've been to Germany. I think Panama was my first assignment. It was for 2 weeks, and it was when I was 19, and I absolutely loved it. I fell in love with the palm trees and the sun and the weather and I just loved it, and I never wanted to leave, but of course I had to leave. And then I think Germany was next, and I've been to Germany twice, England, Spain, the Middle East, and several other places within the United States.
If you mind me just backtracking just a little bit. Back to you adapting to the military life. How was the physical regimen, the social life, the food?
During basic training at tech school or after? Let's just say during basic training, it was very scary because you went to the chow hall and they had this table they called the snake pit, and that's where like all of the training instructors, they call them TIs, all of the training instructors sat, and you have to like carry yourself in a manner that they told you. Like you have to walk a certain way, carry your tray a certain way, sit down a certain way. So it was always scary going to eat because you never knew when you were going to mess up, and they were looking at you. And then like the first time, maybe the first week, I couldn't even eat because I was just so scared that I would do something wrong. But then you get used to it, and then it becomes normal. And then there were times where you can't even talk at the table, so you just eat. I wasn't used to that. You know, I grew up in a family, and we ate at the table always. That was my parents' rule. We always ate every meal at the table. So we're used to talking and bantering, but there was like no talking. And then you'll try to whisper, and then they will holler, "No talking!" So it was just very scary to eat. And then tech school, they lighten up a little bit more. You go to the chow hall, you can eat, you can talk, you can wear civilian clothes. And then when I got stationed at my base, it was no rules in terms of that. So you went to eat with your friends, you could eat on base or off base. So off base, of course, was free. So that food was always better because it was free, but of course off base you would have to pay. But sometimes you didn't want to eat on base, you want to eat off base. But eating on base was great because they had a variety of food that you could choose from. So.
How was the social life?
Excellent. And like I said, you grew up like a family, so there were cliques, and everybody formed their little cliques, but I'm a very social person, you know, especially now that I've grown out of all that shyness. But even then, people always were drawn to me, so I wasn't shy within my group of friends. I was just shy in front of a group of people I didn't know. So I developed my group of friends, and you were extremely tight. I mean, you did everything together. And now that I'm out the military, that's one of the main things that I miss. I don't have that family anymore. You know, I'm used to, you get off work and we go eat or we go party or but we're always together. And that's what I miss, that camaraderie. And that's what you get in the military, and it's very strong. They are always looking out for you. And like when we go somewhere overseas, you know, the male guys, they're always looking out for you to make sure that you don't run across anybody in these foreign countries who's going to, you know, harm you or do anything bad. So that's what I loved.
Before you move on, I want to interject and ask a question about the socializing in the group. So you said, so how did you all pick each other, or what's some of the story?
I'm trying to think, because when I first started at Right Pad, of course I was young, so people automatically took to me because here I'm this 18-year-old, and they were older because they had been in. They were older. They had been in longer, so they knew the ropes. So usually started, when the beginning just started with people trying to help me acclimate.
Big sister.
Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Big brothers helped me acclimate myself to the military, and when I was doing something wrong, they would tell me, you don't need to do that because it's against the rules or this, that, and the other. And so that's how it really started. But then, of course, like at Right Pad, you also meet friends outside of your core group of friends in other departments or other branches, because you might have to work with them. So sometimes, like in my job, I may have to work with the main office who does the performance evaluations and stuff like that, and then you become friends like that.
Have you stayed in touch with any of these people?
Well, the people that I was in the military with at this last assignment at Dobbins, yes, every year we get together in November for Veterans Day, and we go eat. So that's how we stay together. But still, for me, it's not enough. Like, I want to be able to have that environment, because my last assignment, and let me mention that as a reservist, you can do active duty at any time. So I've done a lot of active duty time. And my last assignment was at Dobbins, at one of the schools we had for civil engineers. It was like 2.5 years I was on active duty, and I always planned parties. So I would plan a party to go to the Fernbeck Museum. Or I would plan a party to go to the NCO club on base. And it was just like everybody came. So like students who were here, I was like, hey, we're going to such and such. And they would come. It was just so much fun. Just so much easy fun. No fighting, none of that. It was just everybody got along and it was fun.
What are some of your favorite memories of serving abroad?
Like I already told you, I love Panama because of the scenery. Like I love palm trees, and being from Dayton, Ohio, really didn't see palm trees. And like I said, my family, we've traveled a lot, and I've seen palm trees here and there. But there were so many palm trees, and I was just like, this is like the best place ever. And it was just so relaxing and so serene. The weather was beautiful at night. So that was a memory that I will always carry with me. There were also a lot of bridges, which at the time I'm still a little scared of bridges, but I was really scared of bridges then, so we had to go over a bridge to go to work, so that was like pretty scary. But what else did I love? I didn't really care for Germany and England because I don't do cold. I'm a sunny girl, so that wasn't very exciting for me.
But you're from Ohio.
I know, that's what everybody say. You're from Ohio. Maybe that's why I'm not a winter girl. Maybe why I like summer, because I grew up in on that snow and blizzards, and I just love the sun and the palm trees and pretty. So Panama, again, was my favorite. I actually did like the Middle East. I went to Qatar, which I think they pronounce it Qatar. It's Qatar. I went there the year I retired, May of 2006 to September. And I actually did like it there because the city, like when you go into the city, was beautiful. You don't see that on TV. You just see like war-torn environment, sand, but it was beautiful. Their shopping mall was 5 levels and it was all glass. I mean, it was just, the water was crystal clear. It was just beautiful. So I loved it there. I mean, I didn't like the sandstorms. Those were not fun. And the heat in August was absolutely ridiculous. I mean, the concrete was so hot you could barely walk. But other than that,
what were temperatures?
Girl, 118 dry heat. So I guess it's supposed to be like California, but I think it was worse. It was so hot. Oh my goodness.
And I have just a follow-up question. So the traveling and so still kind of help us understand the difference between active. You were saying you're on reserve duty, and you're going in once a month, and then 2 weeks
in the summer. But
then
always
you can
had
go
jobs,
to active duty at any time. So kind of
because they always had jobs available. So it was just like they always needed, like whatever your rank was in your job, that was your rank in your job. Like if your job was administrative, you could go anywhere around the world and do that job. Certain things may be different, but the core is still the same. So I became friends with a lady who was over all the admins on base. And so she knew I liked to travel, and she knew sometimes I had availability to do different things. So she would call me and say, oh, I got an assignment to such and such. Do you want it? I'm like, yes, I want it. Or if I can, then I'm like, no, man, I can't do it. And so my last year, I wanted to get in a couple of trips because my goal for my whole military career was to make it to Japan. Because I just wanted to go there. Just seeing everybody who went to Japan, Okinawa, they came back and said it was absolutely wonderful. So I'm like, I want to go. Never got there. So my last year, they had jobs available, and I pulled up the list, and I'm like, okay, I want to go to Japan, I want to go to Italy, I want to go to the Middle East. That'll send me out with a bang. And then Italy got canceled, Japan got canceled, and I ended up going to the Middle East for 4 months. So Italy and Japan were the two most ones, because I missed the Italy trip because I didn't go, and they came back and they were like, oh my God, you missed it. And I'm like, oh. So maybe one day I'll still make it to Japan and Italy, one day.
And so being there 4 months, you're then keeping
Active duty.
Active duty, but keeping the paperwork.
Yeah, I was I was a master sergeant when I retired, and so I rose through the ranks pretty steadily because of my mom. My mom is very organized, very detailed, so she taught me to be that way in the way I worked in the administrative field. So because of that, my bosses always loved me, and so I pretty much rose through the ranks pretty quickly. So in the military, once you become a sergeant, you're pretty much a supervisor. So like I said, they train you early on to be a leader. And I think I became a sergeant, I was 22, so I was young and I'm a supervisor over people. And so by the time I retired, I was a master sergeant, which is an E7. So I had 2 more to go for the top. So I was a master sergeant, then a senior master sergeant, then this chief master sergeant, and that's the top of the enlisted ranks. So I was pretty high up. But when you're master sergeant, you're automatically a supervisor. Okay. So I didn't really want to be a supervisor when I went up to the Middle East because I just wanted to go over there, do my job, not have to deal with the stresses of supervising people and staff. But I was, so I had to manage 2 administrative people and 2 computer people. They were part of my section. Mm-hmm. And being in the Middle East, never been there before, you don't have resources like you do in America. So when I had to plan a commander's, what do they call it? It was where the old commander was leaving and the new commander was coming in. So I had to plan that event. Mm-hmm. And that was very difficult having minimal resources. But again, the way I've been trained, I was able to pull it off with no problem. And so I did things like that. And then the group of people who were there when I arrived, it was time for them to go home. And in order for them to go home, you have to print tickets. So it's not like going to Delta to get tickets. It's the whole military program that you have to utilize, and it's secure. So people can't find out that these people are coming home and do something to the plane or whatever. And I had no clue how to do that, not one. But I asked questions. I'm good at figuring stuff out. I figured out and I got them home. And so the guy who was over that group was like, oh my God, I can't believe you did it. So it was just, I love the military because I like to work. I like to work hard. I like to know that I'm doing a good job. And it's evident when you're in the military, when you're doing something. And, you know, I had to send 250 people home. And I got them all home safely. So that was just like, okay, did that. Next. And there was so many next, it was like ridiculous.
So just having to do like big, because so if you're working and you're doing administration, and you also mentioned about maybe issues, of people issues
people.
of office.
I had a lot of
office.
Yes,
Can you share a story with us?
Well, when I'm working, I'm very serious. I believe when you're at work, it's time to work. When we're off work, we can play, but don't play on my time. I don't like that, and I am. Again, I'm not as shy as I used to be, so I speak my mind now. And so, of course, my employees didn't like me for that. But I'm just like, okay, this is the job. You've been in long enough where you know to come to work and do the job, not play around. They would show up late. One girl, because we had to work 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. And so my night employees, I wouldn't even see them. Because when we switched shifts, they come in, I wouldn't see them. And the one girl wasn't even coming into work for like 6 hours. And I didn't know, of course. And so it was just like, really? Come on now. So dealing with that was just, I didn't want that on my last tour. I didn't want that stress. I didn't want to have to deal with writing people up. And I was writing them up so much, and I got tired of it. I said, forget it. Whatever.
Photos. Do you have photos of all these places you travel?
You know what? I am a big picture taker, and I've had photos of all of it. Mm-hmm. But in one of my apartments a few years ago, I had everything in a container and I put it outside on my deck. On my deck, the roof wasn't really one piece. It was pieces of, wood, boards. And so the rain got to it and ruined all of my pictures. Mm-hmm. I was so upset. I'm still upset, but what can I do about it? Nothing. So I still have some pictures, mm-hmm. but the rest of them are up here.
Can you recall anyone specifically that you formed a bond with?
Yes, but there wasn't any one. Like I said, I'm very sociable, so I'm friends with everyone. You had your cliques, but I was friends with all of the cliques. And then, of course, my clique didn't really like the fact I was friends with all the cliques, but I'm like, I don't care. I don't see cliques. I don't see different races of people or different nationalities. I just see people. And so I was friends with everyone, but my clique consisted of quite a few people. As a matter of fact, all of the women, there are not many women in the military. So in my unit, we had maybe 9 women. So only like 2 or 3 of them were not in my clique. So actually, we formed a little group, and we called ourselves the CE Sisterhood. And actually, our picture is right there. So we actually took a picture so that we can always, and we all have a picture framed so that we can always remember our CE Sisterhood. But that was pretty much the female clique. And then, you had the guys who were always with us as well. So we would always go to lunch together.
And CE is civil engineering.
Yes, okay. Civil engineering. And civil engineering consisted of, we had engineers, we had me, of course, admin. And then I was also, part of my career, I went back to school at Air Force Base in Mississippi. And what's so crazy, when I went back to school to change careers, to change the personnel, I can't remember what year that was. I think it might have been 10 years later. I go back to school to change my career field. And
So you're thinking 96?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, because it was before I moved to Atlanta. Moved to Atlanta in 94.
Okay.
So it's probably 91.
Okay.
No, I'm wrong. Probably right, 96. Because in between, when I moved to Atlanta, I did move back home to Ohio twice in between times.
Okay.
So it was one of those times I went back to Ohio. So I went to back to Biloxi, Mississippi, where I was years earlier as a youngin'. And then I ran into a lady who was in my unit all those years ago. And she still looked the same. I'm like, oh my God, Bridget. She was like, oh my God, Yvette. I'm like, you still look the same? She was like, you still look the same. And it had been like 10 years later. So that was like awesome experience because we were friends when we first went into the military. And of course, we didn't keep in touch. Like a lot of people I went to basic training with, we didn't keep in touch. And so it was just awesome to see her again after all that time. But civil engineer consists of, like I said, engineers, admin, personnel, human resource, education, pavements and equipment, fire guys and girls, electricians, structures, HVAC, that all made up civil engineering. So we all had our specific duties when we went to war. And for us, going to war is playing our war games. On our 2 weeks, we'd play our war games, and we have to sleep in the field. And so like my job, being administrative, was I had to pack a big old, like a locker box. What do you call those things? I have one actually in my room because my friend, when I retired, Foot Locker.
Okay.
My friend made me a Foot Locker. She know I love camouflage. I collect camouflage, anything. So she made me a Foot Locker for my retirement. But I had to pack one of those with, paper, pens, tape, scissors, essentials that we may need in the field. And then like, you had other departments that are responsible for other things. Like, we had to have water. So you had to have people, we had a water buffalo. Then we had to have lights. So the electrician had to hook up the lights. We had to have food. Oh, we had food services a part of us too. We had to have food. So food service would feed us lunch, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then we had to put up tents for us to sleep. So it was just, I don't know, I loved the military. It was just remarkable seeing all those different units work together. And then at the end of the day, you have this big, in the woods, but this big like
city.
little city.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So the buffalo, what is?
It was
you
just a
call
big
it
old.
that?
Yeah, we called it. Yes, we called it
Okay.
water buffalo. But it was just a big old round plastic gallon of water, and that's where we got our water source from.
How did you stay in touch with your family and friends back home?
Well, in basic training, I think we were allowed to make phone calls towards the end when we were getting ready to graduate and go to tech school. Tech school, I could call home anytime because it was a little more lenient. Although, I got in trouble there too. I seem to get in trouble anywhere I go. I got in trouble there too because guys were not supposed to be in our rooms, but I locked something in my drawer and I needed it. So I asked this guy to come in and help me. So I got in trouble for that because he wasn't supposed to be in my room. But I tried to explain I needed something. And he was like, but he's not supposed to be in your room. I don't care what you needed. You should have waited and got somebody in charge. So I got in trouble for that in tech school. But, and then of course after that I was in the reserve, so. But even if I was active duty, you can call home anytime because then you're just working, like I said, a civilian job. Seemed like.
So before you move on to ask her about that, while you were still in the military, we haven't had a chance to talk about, so this is relations between men and women, how women were treated, kind of help us understand that.
For me,
any gender issues that were existed.
Most definitely. But for me, I wasn't an uptight female. So I guess because I grew up as a tomboy, I was used to hanging with boys, and I'm used to how boys act. So it really didn't rub me the wrong ways, where a lot of their actions offended a lot of my friends. But for me, I was just like, that's what boys do. That's what men do, whatever. It's no big deal. But if I had a situation, then I would voice it and let them know, look, this, that, or the other. But there are definitely issues with, sexual harassment, sexism. But again, for me, that was never an issue because I didn't take that seriously. But had I taken it seriously, then it would have definitely been sexual harassment. But I knew that they were just being men, and at any time, if it was offending me, all I had to say, like the fire guys, they in my perspective, the men treated you like you were one of them because you're in a man's military. So, some of them believe, well, you're in a man's military, this is what you have to deal with. So I understood that, and I was able to deal with that and play that game. But the fire guys, they would say stuff, and I'm like, okay, guys, now I don't get offended easily, but that just went overboard. And then they'll say, I'm sorry, Master Sergeant Jackson. So it was like, it wasn't, what's the word? It wasn't like it was a situation where it was my superior and he was forcing me to do something. I never experienced that one.
But did it exist?
Mm-hmm.
Or you
it
heard about
exists.
it? Mm-hmm.
I heard about it, but I never knew anyone who experienced that as well.
Mm-hmm.
At least they didn't say it. And like I said, the military, you're pretty much a family, so if things go on, you tell your family. You tell your circle, this happened, this is what's going on, because they help you through these things.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I've never known anyone who's experienced any of that.
What about race? I know you mentioned there were some cliques. So
Again, for
racism.
me, I never experienced that
Mm-hmm.
because I was a great worker, and all my bosses who were Caucasian, they loved me because I was a great worker, and I always went above and beyond, and I always volunteered for everything. So they loved me, but I had other friends who were complaining that they were not getting promoted because of their race, which I didn't see that as the problem. Because like in the reserve, like in some of those sections, like utilities, I don't think I mentioned it earlier, but they were a part of our group. And they might not have anything to do on their weekends, so they just sit around and they're training, they're talking. But I know my one friend complained that she wasn't getting promoted, and she thought it was because of the race. All of the guys who were happened to be Caucasian were getting promoted, but she wasn't. And she was like, we all sit around and don't do anything. We all sit around and don't do nothing. But for me, I was like, well, you should be the one person who is doing something. That was the way I saw it, because it's a known fact. I don't know if it's a known fact, but it's a known statement that African Americans have to work twice as hard. So you can't let up. And I never let up. So I don't know if that had anything to do with it, but I never had issues.
And what about same sex?
I did not know of anybody who was same sex in my unit. Or even like when I traveled to other, I never saw that. Because it wasn't really...
Didn't know about don't ask, don't tell.
Yeah, it was don't ask, don't tell, but it really wasn't, I don't think that apparent like it is today. That apparent, back when I joined and came in. Because you couldn't tell just by looking at somebody what they were, and so I only ran across one person who was same sex, but that was after 18 years of being in, well, not 18 because I started in Right Pad, but that was after a long time of knowing them. I didn't know. So it was like that don't ask, don't tell. And like I said, it wasn't really apparent like it is today.
So it's, I guess, people's behavior it was just a matter of just keeping it under wraps.
Right,
you know.
right. You knew that you could not let on that you were. So people didn't walk a different way or do their hair a different way or talk a different way. You know, if you were a man, whether if you were gay, nobody knew because you still portrayed yourself as a man. And same thing as a female. So.
You spoke, frequently about, there's a certain time and a place for everything. So with this fun, what kind of fun were you having when you were off duty?
Off duty? Well, I can say, military, we drink a lot. So we would go out and drink. But I'm not a big drinker, meaning 2 drinks and I'm tipsy, so I'm done after 2. But others can, they could hold their liquor much better than I could. But that's what we did. We drank, alcohol. But that was pretty much it because you could not do any drugs because you have random tests where they test your urine. So all we could do was drink, and so that's what we did. But it was never like, like when we go on our 2 weeks and we're in England and off duty, like you said, we go back home, we change our clothes, and we hit the town. So it was never like drinking to the point you can't walk, you can't stand up, or any of that. We just drank socially to have fun, to loosen up from a hard day, or, pretty much that. So like we would go sightseeing, we would go to the pubs in England, or if we were in, on state, we would go to the clubs. And I remember, where were we at? Germany? England? I think it was England. We went to a club. We all went to a club, and we tend to travel in groups, that way we stay safe. But we went to a club, and it was really fun. And I remember in Germany, we went to a club, and I have never seen, it was a huge warehouse, and I have never seen so many African American people in my life. I mean, not in my life, but I'm just saying in Germany, you don't think you would see that many. But it was so many, and I was just like, wow, African American people were in Germany. So traveling with the military, it broadened my horizons. It opened my mind to the fact that African American people live and work and exist everywhere. And then one other thing I wanted to say about the camaraderie, it also existed outside of your circle. Meaning when I went to Spain, I went to Spain by myself. And so when I got there, the older people who were in that unit that I was working in, they would like take me under their wing. Well, come and have dinner. Come to our house and have dinner. And I think that happened also. I was stationed in Warner Robins, Georgia. And so they were just, everybody was so nice and friendly. And they was like, okay, I'll show you around town or this, that, and the other. And the spouses were the same way. It was never any of that, like that exists in civilian life. You can't befriend a man and then their woman gets mad or jealous. It was never any of that. They'll invite me, come over, my wife will cook dinner for us, and I'll go over there, and it was just so nice, so friendly. It's just a different environment.
So when you mentioned you would go by yourself, so you're getting these new assignments, and it would just be you. So
yeah, it would
you'd
just
have
be
to
me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So I wouldn't have my circle of friends and my group to be with me. I was just by myself. But I never was afraid because I knew once I got there would be several people who would take me underneath their wing and make me feel at home.
When did you decide to finish your service?
I retired in December of 2006, and I actually was getting to the point where I was getting burnt out, and that was reflected in my attitude. So I was having a bad attitude, and so I was starting to lose it with my superiors, and that's a no-no. It's called insubordination. So I'm like, okay, I did not want to get put out. I think it's probably my goal was 20 years. So I said, but I really wanted to do 30. I really did. But my attitude, I wouldn't have made it. I was just so burnt out and tired. And so I was just like, okay, I think I put in my retirement papers early 2005, and then I changed my mind. I'm like, I don't want to go. And then my friend, who was the first sergeant, he was like, Yvette, I know you're not ready. And I wasn't ready, but I didn't see any other way. I wanted to leave on good terms, not bad terms. And so I changed my mind, and then 2006, early 2006, I decided to go ahead and do it again. But I wanted to change my mind again, but I didn't want to keep changing my mind. So I was just like, okay, I'm just going to have to go through with it. And then I regretted it. And so in 2000, I was 37 when I retired. So when I turned 40, I called to see if I can get back in. And they were like, well, since you're retired, you will have to meet a board and this, that, and the other. So I was just like, forget it. But I regret it.
How did you actually return home?
Well, there's no return home because I was in a reserve, so I was home. So like I said, I was living in Atlanta, Georgia, exactly Marietta, Austell, had a house in Austell, Georgia. So when I retired, I just went home.
What made you want to stay in Atlanta once you came in for service?
I actually did not. Funny you asked that question, because when I retired, I actually moved to Florida because I wanted to live in Florida, California. Again, I wanted sun and palm trees. And Atlanta, it kind of gets cold here now. So I was like, I don't want any cold weather. So I moved to Florida, Brandon, Florida, absolutely loved it. I lived there for 3 months, and I was procrastinating and looking for a job. And so my money was running out. So I was like, okay, let me go back home to Ohio. So I went back home to Ohio, and I finished my master's degree. And then after I finished that, I moved back here to Atlanta. But at that time, Florida, California, Texas, North Carolina, they were on my list of places I wanted to live. So I went to go visit all of those. But I never felt the things that I feel living in Atlanta. Like, I never feel that energy that Atlanta to me has. I didn't see the diversity that I need to see. So I always end up back in Atlanta.
So it's safe to say you're happy here?
I am at the point actually where I get anxiety really bad now. So all of this bigness is starting to be too much for me. You know, the length of time it takes to get anywhere, how far apart everything is, it's just too much. I want something smaller, which is why I love Brandon, Florida, because my goal was to find like a little small town next to a big city, next to a big town. So when I lived in Florida, it was 20 minutes from Tampa. So I'm like, 20 minutes is nothing. So that's why I loved it there, but it was just a little too hot there for me, a little too hot. But I'm actually looking to maybe go further south, Macon, Georgia, or Warner Robins, Georgia. Macon would be ideal, but I hear it's a little bad there. So I'm thinking Warner Robins because that's where the military, Air Force, active duty military base is. And I still have military benefits, so like I can still go to the commissary, I can still go to the BX, I can still take a hop here, here and there with military benefits. So I think I'm thinking about moving further south in some years.
When you say Macon is bad,
they were telling me that the crime is bad.
okay.
So again, I don't know, but I met somebody a few months ago. I had a friend come and visit me. He lives in D.C., but his friend lives in Macon. And so I met him. He gave me his number. So I'm supposed to go down there and visit and check it out for myself and see if my business, because I have an administrative business where I provide administrative services for self-employed people. So I need to make sure that business will be able to thrive there, as well as in Atlanta, as it has been in Atlanta. But it's a smaller community, so I'm not sure. So I have to go check it out. But I really do want to go somewhere smaller, where I can get across town in 15 minutes, not an hour.
Making maybe a little too small. Was there any major readjustments to civilian life for you?
Actually, there was. You wouldn't think there would be, because being a reserve, I've always had a civilian job. But there were adjustments, and there are adjustments, because in the military, your rank is what precedes everything. Your job is your job, but your rank is where you get the respect that you deserve after working hard. And like when the military is big on, in order to reach certain ranks, you have to pass tests. You have to have an associate's degree, and you have to have, I don't know if you have to have an undergraduate degree to become an officer, but at one point I wanted to become an officer, and I took the test and I passed, but I was too late because the age was 35 and I was already 35. And they used to give waivers and they stopped giving waivers, so I missed that point. But if I would have went to be an officer, I would have done 30 years. I would have stayed in. But my rank as a master sergeant, it got me the respect that I deserved. And in civilian life, I'm finding that that's not the case. People treat you like you're a flunky, like you have no education and no experience in the administrative field. And so it's weird because I started in mortgages and I love the mortgage industry, but I felt like I wasn't utilizing all of my skills for event planning and organizing and all of that administrative that I did in the military. But since I've been out, I realized it's not the same. Because again, people can treat you like you're flunky. And I did not go to college to become a flunky or attain 30 years experience to still be having people telling me to go make this phone call or get this. No. And so in the military that wouldn't happen because you're a master sergeant, so no one can treat you that way. You know, people who are airmen, senior airmen, they're the ones who do the grunt work. So that's what I'm finding very difficult to deal with.
Have you remained in contact or reunited with any of the veterans aside from the ones you meet annually for Veterans Day?
You know, Facebook has helped with that because I've had people who asked to be my friends, and I'm like, okay, I don't know them. Who are they? And then I'll see their military uniform, and I'm like, okay, I must have met them somewhere in my military career. So I have a few of those on my page who were people I've met at various bases I've been stationed at. And so, you know, they're my Facebook friend. But few people, not many people from Ohio, of course, because I don't live there anymore. And a lot of them have retired. And that's the thing, a lot of people, most of my clique were older than me. So they all retired before me. And so now when I go back to the base, and I'm like, okay, I don't know any of these people. And I'm like, I don't like that because at one time I knew everybody. And we had like 130 people in our unit. And I knew everybody because I was the person that they met when they first came in because I had a human resource role. So I was I did the orientations. So I met the people first. And again, I'm very social, so I always knew them. And you know, when I see them, I always try to make sure, how are the kids, how's the wife, make sure to ask them about some part of their life. So now I go back, I'm like, okay, I don't hardly know anyone, I don't like that. So now it's just like really, I really feel detached from something that I was a part of for so many years.
Are you a member of any veterans organizations?
I am not. I want to be, but I am not.
Are there any that you're looking, towards joining?
I actually was a part of the National Association of Black Military Women, and I actually helped start the Atlanta chapter again back in, time goes by so quick it's hard to keep up. It was 2011 when I made my film, and the lady who's in my film told me about the organization. She was like, you'll be the perfect person to help me get this started because you're so organized, you're this, that, and the other. So I kept saying no, 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 but then she finally talked me into it, so I said, okay, fine. So we started the Atlanta chapter again, and I was a member of that as the treasurer, but I'm not anymore. There were some differences of the way I work and they work. Again, I'm very serious about my work. If we're going to do something, we're going to do it right, and we're going to do it by the book. I'm not willing to be a part of situations where it's just like, oh, okay, we'll do that later, or we don't have to worry about that. So that didn't work out. So in the future, though, I look forward to joining an organization again and being active.
What have you done since separating from the military?
Since separating, like I said, I've got my master's degree in business. I lived in Florida for those 3 months, lived in Ohio for 3 years, moved back here in 2010, worked various jobs. To be honest, since I've retired from the military, I have not had a permanent job. When I was in Ohio, I worked for Cincinnati Bell, was the telephone company, but it was like permanent temporary. So you were full-time, but you were not a permanent employee, which is fine, because I knew I didn't like Ohio and I was ready to move again, but I was in school, so that was the best place for me because there was no stress whatsoever. And that master's program was extremely stressful. So I needed to have no stress in the rest of my life because that was enough. And then when I moved back to Atlanta, I worked a temp job. And then after that, I got a position at the library where I met Candy. And I worked there for almost 3 years till I got laid off last year. And then I started my own business, which went very well last year. But then one of my clients asked me to go full-time this year. So now I have a full-time permanent position, but now I don't want it because I want to do my business. So my contract is up in December and I hope to do my business again. But to be honest, I was just telling friends a couple of days ago that I'm a little confused because I did not expect to be at this point in my life at such an early age. You know, because I joined at 17, I retired at 37, and at 17, I didn't really calculate 20 years. I'm thinking 20 years, okay, I'm gonna be old. But no, I was still young, which means I still had to work. I'm like, what do I do now? And so I was like, okay, do administration, do what I know, do what I love. But like I said, it's not the same in the civilian world, and I can't work like that. So now I'm like, what do I do? I did not expect to have to figure out a new career at this age. I thought my career would take me till I was old, ready to collect Social Security. But now I'm like 46, like, what do I do now? So, you know, I made a documentary film, and I'm thinking, well, maybe I can go into the film industry. But to be honest, I don't know. And as a matter of fact, a friend of mine, Francine Henderson, received an AARP magazine. And so something just said read through it, and I read through it, and one article was about people who were over 50 and they were embarking on a new career or a new way of life. So there was one lady who didn't go back, but she went to medical school at 50, and now she's 60 and she's a doctor. And then there was another man who is a stunt driver. He's 65 and he's a stunt car driver. And then there was another person who was that person? They were in their 60s and they were doing something. So it's just like, because we're living longer, we're having to reinvent ourselves for the next half of our life. So it's just like, I really don't know where my journey heads next. I really don't.
Now, you skimmed over and I made a film. There's more of a story to I made a film. So please share that with us.
Okay. Well, when I was working at the library, Auburn Avenue Research Library on African American culture and history. And sad to say, but when I started working there, that's when I felt like I was learning my history for the first time. Because in my schools in Ohio, you were not taught that. And in Ohio, there may be now, but there were not a lot of like events or associations where that was prominent. So when I started working at the library, I felt like, okay, I'm learning my history for the first time, and I'm meeting history. You know, I'm meeting people who were a part of the history movement. And so it just inspired me to make a documentary. And the reason why I chose the military is because that's what I knew. I was in the military, and I was a African American female in the military. And I realized that when you see movies or commercials or TV shows, you don't see African American women represented. And I realized, I know I served, so why don't I see somebody like me being portrayed? And so that's when I decided to do a documentary on African American women in the military. And it was wonderful. So basically, some of the questions you're asking me, I asked of these women. And I wanted women who made it a career because I also wanted to influence young people, because working at the library, I met a lot of young people because I was over the volunteers. So I asked them, so what do you want to do? And some were in high school and then some were in college, but hardly any of them ever said they want to join the military. And I'm like, why not? That's a great option. It was a wonderful option for me, and it's a great option. So I wanted young girls to see the documentary and see what you go through. Like I said, there is racism, there is sexism, there is sexual harassment, but there are ways to deal with that and still have a great career in the military. So that's why I made the documentary.
Did you already know how to do films? Or
Oh, no. Like I said earlier, I'm great at figuring things out. That's one of the gifts God gave me. So I had no clue how to make a film. I had no clue how to do any of it. I just went with the way I was trained in the military. Whenever we had situations or, like I said, we played war games. And then one time we went to Savannah, and it was a huge war game with all these Air Force units from across the United States. So we were all being put together and we were playing war games, but it was, in our minds, this is real, this is a war, because we train for war. This is what we do. And so you have to make plans, you have to make strategic plans, you have to make backup plans, because I was the person who was the facility manager. So basically I had a building and I was in charge of everybody in that building. So if somebody who had an essential task died, then I have to be able to get somebody to replace that, because we still have to fight this war. So it was, and I love stuff like that. God, I just love stuff like that. It just gets my adrenaline flowing. It's awesome. But I don't know if I got the question.
So how did you apply that knowledge to making your documentary? Because you were saying that all helped you.
Yes. Oh, yes. So when I went about my documentary, I already knew what I wanted to make a documentary on. So that's usually the hardest part. The rest is easy to me after that. So then at that point, I just started talking to people, saying I'm making a documentary on African American women in the military. Do you know anybody who served in the Marines, the Air Force, the Navy, the Army? Because I knew I wanted to represent all branches, because experiences are different. You know, my Air Force experience would be totally different if I was in the Army. And I remember one time I was in Germany and I made friends with a civilian lady, but her husband was in the military. So she was like, well, come to the base with me, his base, because she had to ask him something. So she ran into an officer that she knew. So they were talking, and then he just kept staring at me, and he was just like, I was staring at you because I'm looking at your earrings, and that's not regulation. But then I realized you were in the Air Force, and I was just like, yeah. And that was the first time I realized that the regulations for the Air Force women and Army women are different. And that's why I was like, ooh, I could not be in the Army. So I asked around and got a few people I knew. Sparkle Adams, had actually been sort of a mentor of mine, because she worked in she was like over human resource for the whole base. So all of, like me, the human resource people in each unit were like, we didn't report to her, she wasn't our boss, but we reported to her. So basically, she made sure we were following all the guidelines in our units. And then she loved my organized setup and basically made me the poster child for everybody on the base. So everybody's setup had to be like Yvette's, and that's what she would say. Your setup need to be like Yvette. Call Yvette or goes to Yvette and see how she's set up. I'm like, Sparkle, why do you do that? Now they're going to hate me because they know I'm the favorite. So she was my first choice. So I got her and talked to her and asked her, told her what I was doing, and asked her, did she want to be in it? And then my best friend's aunt was in the Army. So I had Sparkle's in the Air Force. So she was in the Army, and so I asked her, did she want to be in? And she said yes. And then the other ladies were recommended by people that I was asking, do you know anybody? I was like, yeah, I know somebody who used to be in the Navy. I know somebody. And so that's how I obtained the ladies who were going to be in.
And then you had a young person in it
yes,
as well. So.
But in the beginning of my documentary, and that's where, because I learned when you work on a project like that, you start out with something, but during the course of it, it'll change. So in the beginning, I knew I wanted career women to speak about these questions that I hadn't yet formulated. But in talking to them, I formulated the questions that I want to ask them. Then I was like, okay, if I'm trying to approach young women or influence young women, they may want to see somebody young, not older. So that's when I asked around if anybody knew any young people who knew they wanted to go into the military. And so Francine Henderson's stepdaughter wanted to go into the military, but she was struggling. She would have to lose weight, and so she knew she wanted to go in, and she was working very hard to lose the weight. And she impressed me because she knew she had a goal that she had to meet, and she was working very hard to meet that goal. So So I said, I want you to be in my documentary. I want you to talk about them struggles, because somebody else may have those struggles, but they'll know that they can work on it and they could still achieve their goal. And then there was another young lady who was volunteering at the library, and her aunt was in my film. And so she said, well, my niece wants to go to the military. I was like, oh, let me talk to her. And so then I asked her to be in my film. So at the end of the film, it's the young perspective, and I asked them certain questions like, when did you know you want to join the military? Why did you choose the military over college? So questions like that. And so the documentary was career women talking about their experience in the military, and then the young piece. Then I thought about, well, I want to add some history to the documentary. So the beginning is history about African American women who were in the military way back when, like Harriet Tubman and individuals like that. So I did the research and I added that. So the first part is about the history. So you're learning about the people who were in the military before women were allowed to be in the military. Then I talk about the date and time when women were allowed to become in the military. And then the point in time when African American women were allowed to join the military. And then you go to the career women, then you go to the young people. And then I was like, well, I think people would like to see us in our uniforms. Because I wanted to be in it, but I was trying to lose weight, never did, so I was just like, forget it. And so I thought about people who wanted to see us in our uniforms. So then I got the bright idea to get pictures from people, which was very difficult, trying to get pictures from people in the time frame that I needed them in. But I got pictures of people in their uniforms, so that's the end. And then that's where I put myself in there with my pictures from when I was in the military.
And where did the flag idea come that we're using?
You know what? You're asking a very good question, because again, I knew I wanted my background to be solid, because I've seen other documentaries and I kind of lose focus paying attention to what's in the background. So I knew I wanted a solid background. So then one day I'm like, okay, what can it be? What can it be? Just a white wall? Like, that's boring. So I was like, the flag. We were in the military, why not have the United States flag in the background? And so that's when I decided to have the background, the flag.
Now I know. I'm sure I've got more questions,
Yes.
but that.
And you know, it's just weird now, because now that I've made a documentary film, now when I look at TV, I look at it in a whole different way. I actually look at the credits and see the names and the categories where these names fall, because I'm new to it. So I was just learning what a producer does, what a director does, what all these different jobs do. So now I actually pay attention to different things when I'm watching movies, and the lighting, it's just so much that goes into it. And of course, that was my first one. But as a result of my film in 2011, my first screening was at the library, Auburn Avenue Research Library, in November of 2011, because it was for Veterans Day project. And then from that, I was accepted. I won a slot in a film festival. So some lady who saw it told some lady in New Jersey about it. She called me and asked me to send her my film, and I did. And I won a slot in the film festival in New Jersey. I cannot remember the name of the school now, because I wasn't able to attend as I had planned, because I had to move and my lease was ending, so I wasn't able to attend. But I was upset about that. And then from that, from some lady seeing it there, she called me, wanted to film screen it in Galveston, Texas for the Army Corps of Engineers. And then from that, some lady saw it in Miami and wanted me to do a radio show, but I had to pay for it, so of course I declined that one. But a friend of Francine Henderson, who was the administrator of the library at the time, came to town, and she was telling her about it, and she was like, oh, I would like to see it. And so I sent it to her, she saw it, and then they decided they wanted to buy it. And so that was the University of Nebraska who bought a copy of my film. So from that film, it was just like, I was a celebrity for a little bit.
Do you plan on doing any more films?
You know what? After I did that film, I was right on the tips of doing, I was like, okay, I'm ready for my next film. And my next film was going to be a little harder, because it was going to be about a subject that, I don't want to say it now because I do decide to do it down the road, but it was about a subject that no one was aware of. But that's like the purpose of my films, like my my tag for my film company is films with a purpose. So I only want to do documentaries, and I want them to be films with a purpose, meaning it will be a subject that no one really knows about, that's not being broadcasted, that's on the back burner. But I lost my momentum. I lost it, and I have several topics of documentaries that I want to do, but I need that momentum back. I need that motivation back.
We need an executive producer for our film.
Oh, for real?
We do.
Okay. That would be great.
We're aiming for 100 interviews and how to put this together into a video documentary project.
Right. That sounds awesome. I need those.
We need a director.
And most recently, I thought about doing a documentary, and this one I can speak on. I don't know if it ever comes to fruition, but I'm seriously thinking about doing a documentary and try to scout it to companies, because having experienced what I've experienced in the civilian world doing administration, I believe that, let's say, 90% of people leave their jobs because of bad management. And I need this to be known. Managers have this power where they feel like they can treat people like anything, and that's not the case. These people are people. I mean, a lot of them have more education than the managers themselves, because a lot of these managers are chosen because of who they know, not what they've done, what they've achieved. I can count how many jobs where I knew more than the manager, but they're making tons more money than I am. And I'm like, what's wrong with this picture? So I thought about doing a documentary on that to bring that to light. So that may be my next project.
After hours.
After hours.
We'll let you do it simultaneously. Before you move on to some of the last questions, I'm going to circle back to some of the women's issues. Hair and weight. Ooh. Can you touch on those?
Those are big issues. Especially with race, because African American women are built differently than Caucasian women. And the way they measure is neck, waist, and hips. And traditionally, black women have larger hips than Caucasian women. So well, not me because I don't have any, but they're already at a disadvantage because they're measuring the hips. Now, what may help is they traditionally have smaller stomachs, so that may be why women are able to pass it, because you weigh the stomach and they have smaller necks. So that was always an issue, and that was always one thing African American women were fighting about, is because they're like, we're built differently. And then the weight scale is different, because like for me, my max weight was 144, but my ideal weight was 120 something, which was cool when I was in high school. But as you get older, you gain weight, and if you start having babies, you gain weight. So really, how are you supposed to maintain that? And so that was always,
it's based on height.
Yeah, it's based on height.
So
and I'm shorty. I'm shorty. Exactly. So it was like really hard, and we didn't really have tall women in my unit. So we were all pretty much 5'3". I'm 5'3", or they were like 5'7", 5'8". In between 5'3" and 5'7" probably. Weren't really tall. So those were hair was a huge issue, because they have what they call no fad hairstyles. But I used to argue, well, what's fad to you is not fad to me, so how can you tell me what's a fad hairstyle? And I did get in trouble once because I had this hairstyle, and they were like, you can't have that hairstyle, it's a fad hairstyle. And I was like, well, I'm not changing. I just paid $50 to get this hair done. I'm not changing it. And of course I had to change it because it was against the rules. But I was very upset because you had Caucasian women who, to me, had fad hairstyles. If you got your hair cut a certain way, to me that's a fad hairstyle. But nothing was ever said about their hairstyles. And then, like they said, your hair is supposed to be your natural color. Well, you can't tell me a lot of those women are naturally blonde. So they were coloring their hair, but they never got in trouble. But if I color my hair, then I would get in trouble. And then at the time, you were not allowed to wear braids at all. But now you can wear braids in the military. So it's changing a little bit, but back when I was in, hair and weight were big issues for women, especially African American women.
So what's the process of making those changes, or
I just think it's more women fighting for fairness, Because it wasn't fair. Again, how can you tell me what's a fad hairstyle? Your hairstyle is fad to me because it's your style. I mean, your hair is not straight. That's not a fad hairstyle if your hair is just straight. But you have hair, your hair is cut certain in layers, is colored, is flipped here, curled there. So it was just very subjective, and there was really no defining rule that said what a fad hairstyle was. It just said no fad hairstyle. So these supervisors were able to determine that on their own. And it's just like, okay, that's not fair. Where does it say right here in this regulation that I can't curl my hair this way? It doesn't. But because your supervisor is telling you, then you have to do it. Because again, if you don't, it's insubordination, and that's grounds for discharge. Article 15 or other.
So you said that the earring, so the hair and earring or accessory policy, so it varies from branch to branch?
So like the Air Force, we were able to wear diamonds or gold balls that were like so many inches around or whatever. Like no dangling earrings, of course none of this. And then the nails, because I always wore artificial nails. The nails had to be, your nail couldn't be so many inches over the tip of your finger. Then of course polish was an issue. You couldn't have like loud colors. They had to be subdued. And so it was always hard for me to walk that line because again, I'm a very free-spirited person, so I tend to like big earrings and a bunch of rings on my finger and nails that are blue and black and yellow. So it was very hard for me. And you know I'm gonna tell you, when I retired, I said, oh my God, the first thing I'm gonna do is color my hair blonde. And that's what I did. Because I wasn't able to then for all those 20 years because it had to be your natural hair color. So I was just like, I'm coloring my hair blonde as soon as I retire. And that's what I did. So it was just kind of hard to, I liked the structure, but at times it was hard because you couldn't be who you were as an individual.
And I have one last question that is off the page, but still kind of helping us fill in and understand. Air Force support. So just like the Air Force coming in for I guess I say to help with the war. Kind of help us understand what your branch does versus say someone else.
Well, I mentioned it earlier that when we had the war games, our unit was responsible for setting up the city, the lights, the water, the food. So when we all came together, that was our job, and then other people's jobs were different. So like when I went to the Middle East, I thought that I was going to be in my unit, civil engineering, but they put me with aero support, and I was like, I don't want to be at aero support. I want to be with my civil engineering guys because that's what I knew. But it turned out to be a wonderful experience because I learned something I didn't know. I learned how, when you're in the military, because I'm just used to getting on the military plane and going. So at this end of it, I learned how that actually happens, how it's all coordinated, how it all works together. So it's just amazing, like when people come into the gate and they have to check in and register this, that, and the other. I saw how all that worked, and then they have to go wait in the waiting area, and then when they had to transport like biologicals like blood or anything else, how strict and careful you had to be with those type of things. And what else was there with air report? I can't recall at the time, but I learned so much. And I was like, wow, this is awesome. Because when you're in your unit, you don't learn about other units unless you have friends who are in other units, which I did, and they were telling me a little bit about what their job consisted of. But you don't actually get the whole picture until you see it all come together, and all these people are working in their various jobs to make all of this happen. So that was wonderful because, like I said, my whole career I've been in civil engineering. And so when I went to the Middle East, I was in aerial report squadron. So that was awesome. And so everybody has their specific function when in the military.
Of course, I thought of another question. So being in the Middle East, that was during wartime? And
Iraqi freedom. I was there.
During Iraqi freedom, did you see?
No. And you know, I actually volunteered to go to the war. And my people thought I was crazy, but that's who I am. I'm like, okay, if my guys are over there, I want to be over there with them.
Sure.
Well, in this case, they weren't my guys because I went by myself. But the other ones had gone before me. They had gone to Afghanistan, and then some went to Iraq. But I went to Qatar, which was a little small base in between Saudi Arabia and Iraq. And
But very dangerous. Right?
it actually wasn't.
No, okay.
Because I really wanted to go to one of those other bases, but I didn't have a choice. Because I volunteered to go to the war, so I didn't have a choice where they sent me. But where they sent me, for me, it was more like a party base. And it wasn't really party, but it was where the people who were in Afghanistan and Iraq, where they came to get their sanity back. So it's like a resting place for them, a holding place for them. So for me, I'm like, I wanted to go to the real war. Maybe I really didn't. You know what I'm saying? I just thought I did. But I'm like, I want to go to the real war where they were shooting bombs and stuff. But I had friends who went over there and they was like, no, you didn't. Because they came back and they were a little disheveled. And so I don't know how I would have been. But at my base, it was relaxing. I mean, we played volleyball. We had a volleyball team, a basketball team, swimming pool. So I'm like,
The resort.
yes, exactly. But when people would come over and I meet them and they'll tell me about what they experienced, I was like, okay, maybe the Lord knew what he was doing. Maybe he knew what he was doing in placing me here.
But they needed that kind of resort environment to get away.
They had to have that.
How did the military experiences affect your life?
Like I mentioned before, it made me a much more confident female, African American female. And because I know what I've done, what I've been trained to do, how I excelled. And that's one thing I like about the military, because if you excel, they acknowledge it. So you get like certificates of appreciation, or you get awards. So I've gotten many awards for what I've done in the military. Unlike civilian, you really don't get that. You know what I'm saying? You just get, do your job, do your job, do your job. That's your job, do your job. In the military, they believe in motivating you to do your job, because our job in the military is a job, but the whole core of it is you're in the military. So it's a war. When we have a war, you go. But in peacetime, you do your job. So they understood that they needed to motivate their staff, their troops. And so they were very good at motivating, which kept you, you know, because I don't know anybody who doesn't want to do a good job. I mean, there are some people, of course, but most people want to do a good job and they want to be rewarded, not rewarded, but at least acknowledged for doing a good job. And so the military was great at doing that. And that kept me motivated. I would have been motivated anyway, because again, I love my job. I love the people I work with. I loved our mission. But it just helps to know that you're appreciated. You know, in a job or anywhere, in a relationship, anywhere, it helps to know that you're appreciated. And then it's like, okay, I'm appreciated, so I'm going to continue to work hard, you know, for this person or that person or this job or this task. So, is there another part to that question? I can't remember.
Oh no, I got another one that maybe kind of gets related to it. Are there any life lessons that you learned during your service?
Yes. Again, I learned how to be structured, and it's funny because when I'm on my job or a part of associations or event planning, for instance, at the library, they have a staff development day every year where all of the employees from all of the Fulton County libraries get together and they have training sessions on different subjects. And so I volunteered to be on the volunteer committee to hire volunteers to help with this event. And so it was 3 of us. So we had our first meeting, and then the lady who was over it asked a question, so I started talking. And then her and the other lady were looking at me like I was crazy. And I said, okay, let me preface, I was in the military. They were like, oh. So it's like when I go places, people know I'm in the military because the way I structure everything. Everything is like boom, boom, boom. A, this is what we need to do. B, this is where we need to be. C. And so they were looking at me like, what is wrong with her? And so once I told them I was in the military, then they understood how I worked and how serious I work and how everything has to be structured and organized. And then they loved it, and basically they were like, man, you're awesome, but that's how we were taught. You know what I'm saying? We were taught to work in a certain manner, and we were taught to be proactive and not reactive. And a lot of environments I work in, especially the one I work in now, it's reactive. They react to stuff, and I'm just like, why would you wait till the last minute to do this? You knew, blah, blah, blah. So it's just like, with me, they know how I'm working. It's almost like, oh my God, you're too structured, you're too organized. And for me, there's no such thing as too organized. But for people who are not organized, then they don't see that. And I've experienced this in different work environments. For people who are not organized, they don't understand me. But for people who are, they love me, which usually are my bosses, which are the only people I need to be loved by, right? The boss.
It's true. How often do you get that funny look then, for being so structured in your civilian life?
Often. You have not. And when people come over my house and they see my shoes, or they're on shelves, all my shoes are lined up on shelves. I'm like, who does that? And it's like, oh my God, you're too organized. Or they see my little containers that I have my stuff in, and they're labeled. Like my earrings, I have them labeled black, yellow, purple. My bracelets, my necklaces, they're like, oh my God, you're too organized. I cannot stand this. But for me, I can't be any other way.
Maybe asking the same question again. How's your service impacted your feelings about the military in general?
I love the military, and I remember there was one guy, you have people who love it or hate it. There's really no in between. And so when I made my documentary, the little shy part of me felt really timid about promoting it, because I know there were people who hate the military with such passion. But I had to learn to stick up for what I believed in and what I experienced. Of course, these people were never in the military, so they never experienced it. They're just going off of war. Well, there's been war since the beginning of time, whether it was somebody fighting the war that was fruitless or not. It's been there, so it's going to always be there. And we have to have a military that protects this country. And, it's funny that people want the country protected, but how do you think you're going to protect it unless there's a military to protect it? So there was one guy who I worked with, and we got in an argument about that. He expressed his opinions, I expressed mine, and it was just going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And finally I was like, you know what? This is doing no good, because you're going to have yours, I'm going to have mine. Let's just end this conversation now. So it's always that I'm afraid of. And even on my documentaries on YouTube, so right now I think I'm at over 1,000 views, which I didn't put it on YouTube for views, because I didn't really know about YouTube and views and all of that. But I put it on YouTube so that I could tell my friends to go to YouTube and watch it, because that was the easiest way. But I've got many views, and people write comments. And so this one guy wrote a comment talking about, it's not worth selling your soul for that. And I didn't respond to him, which I am, because I didn't feel like I sold my soul. Now I feel like I'm selling my soul, working for a supervisor who treats me like I'm nothing. But in the military, it's totally different. You don't sell your soul. I mean, what I got from the military, I would probably never ever get from a civilian job, because it's different. Your mission is different. What you do collectively is different, and it's different.
What message would you like to leave for future generations that will hear and see this video?
I would say, I can only speak about the Air Force because that's the branch I was in, but I would say that it's a great opportunity to meet people who become your lifelong family, extended family, a great opportunity to travel and learn about life in other countries, other cities, states. And it just reminded me, when I was 18, I told you my first assignment was Panama. So I went over to Panama, and I was enlisted with planning a dinner event for everybody. And so I'm calling around, and none of these people speak English. And so I think I hung up, and there was a civilian guy, Caucasian civilian, who worked there. And I hung up, and I was like, these people need to speak English. And so he quickly corrected me, you're in their country. They don't need to speak English. And from that point on, I started respecting other people's cultures and their history. Because he was right, I'm in their country. They don't have to speak English. They could say, I need to speak Spanish because I'm in their country. And so I started respecting different cultures and their history. And so now when I meet people, because Atlanta's so diverse, so now when I'm like, okay, where's that accent from? And they'll tell me, I'm like, oh, so tell me about how it is where you live, this, that, and the other. I don't judge because we're all different. We all have our different ways we do things, you know. So that was an early lesson that I learned early on in life, which has helped me respect other people. Like I said, I love meeting people from other countries, love it, because I learn things. So that's one thing I want to say is the opportunity to travel and see life other places. And I think the military, even though I traveled a lot as a family, but I was with my family, so I really didn't pay attention. But when you travel with the military and you're stationed somewhere, and you go in a local economy, and you're learning things, you realize there's life other places, which is how I ended up moving to Atlanta. Because a lot of people who I know in Ohio never left Ohio. But I knew there was life other places. People lived other places than where you grew up. And so that helped me in my move to Atlanta. Because when I moved to Atlanta, I was by myself. My parents didn't help me because they were on a cruise. Me and my little yellow car, packed to the top, couldn't even see out the windows, came to Atlanta. Again, a new adventure by myself. I'd never been to Atlanta a day in my life. But the military gave me the courage to do what I want to do without fear. I mean, I already had in the beginning, but it just further solidified it because I was sent places by myself, and I succeeded. So I knew that I could move anywhere by myself, not knowing anyone, and have a good life because you meet people, you talk to people, you have interests, and you get to know people. So that's one thing. Financial was great. The money is great. I mean, you're young, and if you go active duty, you're living in a dorm, so you don't pay for anything. I tried to get my cousin to go, but he didn't want to. But I'm like, you don't pay for anything but your car note. You don't pay for food. You don't pay for lights. You don't pay for cable. You don't pay for rent. You don't pay anything. That's like the best option ever. But he didn't see it. So, but again, it's not for everyone. You have to want certain things out of life. If you want, for me, if you want a better life, military is a great way. And again, they pay for school. So they paid for a lot of my first degree. I have an associate's, a bachelor's, and a master's. So they paid for a lot of my first degree. And then the second one, because you get GI Bill. So that paid, I told you my car note, that's what that paid. But when I went on active duty in Ohio at Wright Pat, and they paid 75% of my school. And so those benefits you can't beat. And the camaraderie, I don't know, it's like those people, I was closer to those people than I were to my own family because we spent all that time together. And the thing is, you have to be, because if you're in a war and you're supposed to be protecting each other, then you need to know that this person has your back. If somebody's shooting at you or trying to kill you, you need to know they have your back. So you have to have some kind of bond where you trust each other like that. And that is formed in the military. It's just automatically formed because, again, you do everything together. You know what I'm saying? You play war games together. You put up tents together for you to sleep in. You go eat together. It's just the best camaraderie I've ever had.
If you had anything you wanted to say to fellow veterans, what would it be?
That's hard because the way that the veterans are treated, I mean, they're treated much better than they were back in my dad's day and probably when I first joined. But I don't know. Because one of the reasons why I wanted to join a veterans organization is to help with the plight of veterans. And, I see, in Atlanta, it's a large homeless population, but I'll see guys hold up a sign that says, veteran, need food, veteran, homeless. And they'll have a picture when they were in their military uniform, and those people I want to help immediately because they are a veteran. And there's no way they should be on the street begging for money when they're a veteran. They serve their country. And so I don't know what I would say. Just keep fighting for veterans' rights.
Is there anything that you would like to discuss that you feel like we haven't covered?
There was one thing that I wrote down on my paper, but I can't remember it now.
Is it the paper here?
Yeah.
Would you like
So can I go get it?
Of course.
Okay.
go.
You have to see me with my glasses on because I can't see them. But actually, I think Dr. What's your last name?
Tate.
Tate.
Dr. Candy.
Yeah, Dr. Candy. I think she already covered it. I was like, what I wrote was, I think you should discuss some of the challenges women face in the military. And that was something you did ask me. And that I mentioned about the racism and the sexism, sexual harassment. And then, you know, there's something else. When I first joined the military, again, I was used to my dad. It's like whenever we traveled, he dealt with the luggage and this, that, and the other. And so when I joined the military, and I'm like my mom packs like 10 bags when we go somewhere. And so I was like her. And so when I joined the military, and we would go like to Germany or Panama, I would have like all this luggage and I would need people to help me. And so one year we went, and one guy said to me, I'm not helping you. You shouldn't have brought all this luggage. This, that, and the other. And I was just like, what? So after that, I started packing 2 suitcases, one so that I could carry myself. Because it was just like, you're in the military. You're not going to a resort where you have butlers, you know, or people who can carry your luggage. And so that was something that I had to learn. You know, being in the military, I need to learn how to pack minimum because you're responsible for yourself. And when I went to the Middle East, I had 2 suitcases, big, huge suitcases though. But you never know your environment. And so when we got off the plane, it was in the middle of, well, the plane I got off of, because I flew civilian. So went to the airport. But then what we took from there was a little commuter plane, and it landed in the middle of this field of rocks. And so I had just bought new luggage for my trip to the Middle East. I had to lug those luggages and all those rocks. You know how many holes I got in my suitcases now? So you never know what environment you're going to be that you're going to have to lug luggage through or walk through or how far you're going to have to walk. So I learned how to make allowances for certain things.
So Yvette, thank you for sharing your stories and experiences of Air Force, military.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you. We thank you for your service, your commitment to our country, to the flag, and we just appreciate you for your time and spending it with us this evening.
Well, no problem. It's my pleasure.
Ours. All right. Let me cut this on just for another second. And tell me again, I know this was the
Yeah, that's the
CE Sisterhood. Actually. And then what's the next picture?
And then the next picture is, on the left is my picture when I went to basic training. And on the right is my picture when I retired from the military.
Okay.
So you can see the kind of the difference on the basic training. I have no ribbons. And then on the one retired, I achieved all those ribbons through my career.
All right. And then what is this group that's next to you?
Is when I was on active duty in my last assignment at Dobbins, I worked for the TCC, which is a training facility for civil engineer students. So that was us, the staff.